Hal,
Hi.
thank you so much for helping my project. It's Christmas time, as you can see. But could you say a few words about yourself?
Well, what kinds of words?
Like, how about what are some of your interests? What kind of career do you do?
Since 1993, I was in computer science for 19 years, and then I went back and I went to seminary and became a pastor, and then I went on sabbatical. And let's see, I was actually born 2 weeks before humans first set foot on the moon.
Oh, wow.
And
1969.
1969. I was born July 7th, 1969, and so it's sort of weird. I would hate to see people go back to the moon in the late part of my life, because I don't want that to be bookends. I want it to be the beginning of the adventure, if you know what I'm saying.
How about in the middle? Is that okay?
The middle is fine. I mean, I'm in the middle. I want to think that I'm in the middle of my life, right?
Oh, absolutely. I think I'm about to turn 50 in
Right.
a year, and I think that's like the new 20. So
Yes,
that's
50 is the new 20, except it's a little harder on your back.
Now, I ran into one lady who said that ever since she hit 50, she started counting backwards, which I don't know. It seems kind of bad, but makes her younger each year. I don't know.
like this.
Yeah,
I like this.
except there is a zero at the end of that. That's the challenge.
Well, I think of it as every year after 38, I earned.
Okay.
Yeah, because health issues get harder and harder every year, and as far as I'm concerned, I've earned it. Excuse me, I had a little too much food, so I might burp.
No worries. And so, what got you into computer science?
First, it was a job. I was working both Burger King and McDonald's at the same time after college because I needed a job. And I would come home with my feet wet every night. And this was in Seattle. And I called a temporary agency and I said, "Get me out of here." And they said, "Well, have you ever used Windows?" And this was 1993. And I had used Windows, but this is before mice were common on computers, and so I had learned to use Windows without a mouse, using the shortcut keys. And I said, "Well, yeah, I've used Windows before, but I didn't learn how to use it with a mouse." And they said, "That'll work for us. We want you to go work at Microsoft." And so I got this temp job at Microsoft, and life brought me to Houston, and I just kept doing it until I could do something that was worth talking about, and ended up teaching it for the local community college, and through their contract to NASA. And so that was a big feather in my cap, was to be able to teach NASA contractors and NASA employees computer science in some of the classes. So that was sort of a neat thing for me. It was like my little tiny contribution to the space program.
That is awesome. I graduated from high school in '94, and that's the same year that Amazon got founded. The Netscape browser got went public, and the beginning of the .com boom. If you
Right, I do remember. I remember that, and I remember like the whole thing. I remember all of it. I mean, the Windows 3.11, I remember all of that stuff. I remember OS2. I remember all those crazy things.
I know IBM. What happened to OS2?
Right.
Did you use OS2?
So at the time I was working in sales, and some IBM guy came around and tried to really convince us that OS2 was the way to go, and it just didn't have the preponderance of killer apps the way that Microsoft Windows did at the time, and that was the way the technology went.
Let's see. I like to tell people that the 2020s are just space, what the 1990s were like to the internet and computers. I was wondering what you thought about that statement.
Say it again.
That the 2020s are to space what the 1990s were to the
Oh.
computer and internet. That we're on the verge of sort of like the space boom. And not boom as an explosion, but
God, I
boom
hope
as
so.
in like...
So, so these things have a way of fizzling out, and it has a lot to do with where our culture is looking, right? There's this. I want to attribute the quote to John Leonhardt, but I think he attributes it to somebody else about windows into our culture, and the window to the, say, for example, the Egyptian culture to build the pyramids. They had a window of opportunity and culture and the ability to say, okay, we can do this and let's do this, right? And I think that right now we have the ability to go, we can do this, let's do this, and I hope that that window stays open, in my opinion. But I think it's possible to close it, and I think it would be a horrible tragedy for our species if we did.
And you also mentioned you recently became a pastor.
Oh, it wasn't recent. I've been on sabbatical for 10 years now. So it's been a while since I was operating a church, involved in a church. I guess not involved is the word, that kind of thing. But you never really stop. You sort of become at large, and and so you just keep doing it. I'm just a little bit more subtle about it than I used to be.
And
I guess that's the word I want to use.
what religion, denomination?
I was trained as a Methodist. I don't know that I would lay claim to it as much as I did originally, but I don't think it's as important. But I was trained as a Methodist pastor.
I had some questions about the moon I wanted to ask you.
Go ahead.
Did you know that NASA's going back to the moon?
I did.
How did you find out?
Well, I keep tabs on stuff like that. That's sort of been a hobby of mine, amongst many things I like to. I've never stopped reading Scientific American, or listening to Science Friday, or that kind of thing. That's always been my shtick. Just because I love that stuff. I love hearing about it. I've never been challenged by the idea of theology and science being opposites. That I find that to be deeply problematic at best. So to me, I'm very excited. Like I said, I don't want it to be the bookend of my life. I'm only 55. To have seen humans go to the moon for the first time in my life. I was only 2 weeks old, so I didn't actually see it. But I want it to be the beginning of the adventure, not the end when they return. I don't want to be 90 and see humans finally go back to the moon.
You mentioned that you want to see, that you believe that science, investigation, and theology should not be at odds with each other, that they should kind of be
absolutely
combined.
So if you don't mind me doing a little theology.
No, please go for it.
There's like, if one of the first things, and I'm sort of talking off the cuff here, this is completely unprepared remarks. If one of the first things that God asked Adam to do is to name the things in the universe, like the animals, we haven't completed the job.
Sure.
We are still finding stuff down in the ocean. We're still finding stuff out in the stars. We're not done. If one of the first things that our job was to tend the garden, we're not done. We're really bad garden tenders. Who said that era of our job is over? No one says that we're supposed to stop. So is it not just an exploration of creation to continue to look into the stars and under the oceans and find new things? I mean, that's my opinion.
I like that point of view. I really like the teachings of Jesus, in the sense of...
I'm a big fan too.
You're big. But in the sense, he talks about humility. He talks about how the law was made for people. People weren't made for the law. A very practical person. I look at Jesus, and I see his teaching as really, we're all valuable. We're all in this together. We can't just drift through life. We have to kind of like participate and be part of it and to shape what's here. And we can't cast anybody off and that everybody has the potential to do better.
Right.
So I mean, that's kind of like the teachings that I got from it that I really like.
I find it like in our current world that the hardest thing that we're doing right now is remembering that the center point, the one thing that I consider the mandate of the Christian faith to be is to love God and love your neighbor as yourself. And that is, the words are, and all the law and the prophets hang on that. Why do we forget this so easily? Why, if it's the one mandated fundamental from the person that we call the Son of God, why are we not remembering that so easily? Why do we have a hard time with this?
And why does institutionalized Christianity tend more on the Pharisee side than on the Jesus side?
Well, I might put finer words on that. Why are we so fascinated with dogma that we can't settle into the idea that we are not the binary creatures that are that really bad, I would call straw man theology, wants us to be, where we can find a great big God in a universe that's so much older than, say, 6,000 years that some people would want to claim. I think that if our theology needs to get deeper because we have learned more about the universe that God created, then so be it. That our theology can grow too. That's my personal opinion. But the dogma, the dogma is not. You're never going to find. How do I put this? You may find God through a little bit of dogma, but you're never going to find all of God in dogma.
Yeah. And then the other side of dogma, the religious experience,
Right.
is having these emotional,
Deep
theater,
emotional. Right. So
type things.
So, man, you're gonna lure me out into
Sorry.
some really deep stuff
You thought
here.
this was about space. Like, wow.
Yeah, I mean, I love my space stuff, but so recently science has discovered, and I'm gonna go way out on a limb here, and if anybody's watching this and they're like, he's totally wrong, I'm willing to accept that I'm totally wrong here, because this is new territory, totally new territory. They've discovered that the human brain, in the microtubules in neurons, of which there are thousands in each neuron, that these microtubules are quantumly linked, that there's some kind of quantum thing going on. They have no idea what. They don't know what's going on, but they're able to, some of the science articles that I've read, they're able to demonstrate that there is quantum stuff moving around. We don't know what it does. We don't know if it's information sharing. We don't know if it's, what it does. This is the beginning of an extremely deep field. Man, it's exciting, but at the same time, it's weird. I mean, what if, with this computer science background, I'm wondering, what if we're all on some kind of wild network and we're completely unaware of it unless we're being meditative and being calm and being connected to the rest of the world around us? What if all of these distractions are keeping us from seeing the stuff that we should be able to see, that others who are lead quieter, more contemplative lives can see? Would that not be the weirdest thing? And again, this is pure speculation, but I know that I'm a better person for when I'm doing what some would call the deeply spiritual stuff, the meditation and the deep prayer and that kind of thing. I'm better off for it when I do. And then you start to wonder, what if the entire brain is like this, not just the prefrontal cortex where we do all of our or thinking. But what if it's also singing? And what if it's language? And what if it's all of these other spiritual practices that have been going on for thousands of years? And yet it all leads to the same place. That would be pretty mind-blowing.
To be able to hear that still, quiet voice.
Still, quiet voice, exactly. That's exactly right.
Space.
Space.
Wow.
Wow.
But,
I mean, people go up there, though. I mean, think of William Shatner going up there, and he went back, and he went up, and he had a religious experience. Now, it was not a religious experience in the typical sense, but he came back changed. And according to the interviews that I've seen, just completely blown away. And deeply overwhelmed by what I would call creation, and wondering why we aren't treating it better. Like, why are we wandering through the vineyard, trashing it?
I know.
So you have to ask these questions, because if you don't, who will?
And the Apollo 8 astronauts on Christmas Day getting to see the Earth from the vicinity of the moon, reading Genesis and having like their own.
Right, and so I'm sort of I'm always a little bit weary about just randomly reading from that stuff without with the intention of inserting dogma over the experience. Does that make sense? But at the same time, it's powerful. Just the fact they were there doing it, so it may have been powerful for them, but we're watching it through TV.
Right.
And it may not have been as powerful for us because, hey, it's a TV, and they can put a lot of things on TV.
And it's like, you go on this vacation and you go to this tall mountain or you see a tall mountain. You're like, it's like huge. And you show them the Polaroid and it's like, see, look how huge it is. And they're like, yeah, it's huge. All right.
Right. And right. Or I have friends from all over the world that I talk to on the internet, and I'll say, yeah, I live in Houston near NASA. Right. And they'll say, oh, you live in Texas. And they get this picture in their head of mesas and longhorn cows. And then I'll send them a picture of the longhorn cows right next to the Saturn V rocket. Yeah, right. And they're like, deer. What just happened?
We have deer hopping around campus too.
And I tell them, this is not. I said, this is not photoshopped at all. This is real. They really have longhorns on the JSC campus. To me, that blows your minds. Of course, there are no mesas around here. I mean, for those of you who don't know. There are no mesas around here. There are no natural rocks around here. I mean, all of the rocks are all imported. There's a park here where the story is that they made, while they were making the playground for this park, that they made them build a mound so that the astronauts' kids would have something to see and say, that's what a hill looks like.
Okay.
Right? Because it's so flat. It's so dead flat. Yeah, so I'm not even sure what the question is now.
Well, I guess when you think about the future of humanity, do you see us as eventually being multiplanetary?
Yes. I'd like to. When I was younger, I wanted it to be a place where people. I wanted there to be a place where people can go and get away from one another when they just can't agree. I would like for, let's say right now, Palestinians and Israelis are out there killing each other right now, but wouldn't it be nice if they could go to their own little corners of the universe and just not have to get along? Now, there may be something said for, y'all need to learn to get along. And maybe we have to do that. Maybe before we can do one thing, we have to learn to do the other. How can we pilot spaceships to the stars and maybe even terraform planets if we can't even make Biosphere 2 work? If we don't understand what's going on our own planet or how to maintain it, how could we possibly go to another one and not trash it horribly? there are people that discuss the future of any species as a series of filters. If one of those filters is runaway, unintentional anti-terraforming, if you know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Not terraforming, but anti-terraforming.
Yeah, unintentional terraforming.
Right.
Where
is that a filter we have to survive? Is, for example, the idea of limits to growth, is that a filter we have to survive in order for us to get to the place where we can go to other worlds? And maybe Mars isn't a place we terraform, but maybe someplace else, maybe something that's even closer to Earth. Not physically closer to Earth, but more like Earth. I think we have a lot of lessons to learn, and I think one of them is how we treat each other. And that may be a whole other technology, like a human technology, a way to think different, a way to act different. In the actual book by Michael Crichton, that's the follow-up to Jurassic Park, the lesson that he sort of imparts is an idea that behavior of an animal set, in the case of velociraptors, couldn't be run away and trash, and that behavior set can be so infectious that it becomes the normal behavior set for the species. Are we in that kind of same scenario? And again, we get around to the window closing on the building of the pyramids. The Egyptians don't build them anymore. Their culture closed the window. And it would be, to me, to wrap this a whole 180 degrees or 360 degrees, wouldn't it be a terrible tragedy for us to close that window for ourselves because we are unable to be wholly human, in the sense of accepting the idea that we're never going to ditch religion, and at the same time we're never going to ditch, like, oil, for example. And at the same time we've opened the Pandora's box on all of these bad things, nuclear power, and we're afraid to sit down and meditate because we're going to lose out if we're not spending every single moment making all the money we can. I just have more questions. Who are our sages? Who are we calling the people that are really our leaders? Are we letting the worship of money be our leader? Are we letting the worship of ideology be our leader? Or are we willing to accept that maybe we should be a little calmer?
Right, our temporary pleasures or whatever.
Right. I mean, my backyard just so happens, not by intent, but just by pure chance, I can see the sunrise over the trees.
Oh, that's great.
Okay, and on an optimal morning, when I could still have coffee, and I may still have coffee again one day, I could go out and sit on a cement pad that I built, surrounded by vegetables that I planted, and do morning meditation and morning prayers and have coffee and just connect. Right? Now, it gets hard some days, and you can't always do it, but what if that was a human technology? What if that was a technology that we needed to impart to our young in order to be able to do these other technologies without wrecking ourselves?
Just the ability to focus.
Just the ability to meditate and focus and understand your place in the world and how you are a part of something bigger from birth to death. That's pretty deep stuff. But, maybe it's a technology. And I'm sure that somebody's going to throw up all over this, but maybe it's a technology we need to start talking about. Is like the ability to parse our minds out a little bit better than we do, instead of being so caught up and violent and angry and upset all the time with everything. That without this, we cannot progress.
Yeah. I mean, we're so shaped by our environment in terms of goals, what we value, things like this. I mean, to actually kind of take a step out of that environment and kind of come up with goals. I mean, the thing I like about the creator space is the idea of taking something apart, building something, is something that is recognized as valuable inside this environment, and that is not universal. You could go, you could take activities that are done here in the creator space. You go talk to people and they're like, why would you do that? What value does that have? You know, that type of thing. You know?
Right. I mean, what value does an atomizer have? You know, and by atomizer, for those of you who don't know,
The fragrance thing.
thing, right? And yet, if people weren't spraying perfume on themselves, how could we possibly make the internal combustion engine work? You know, that these things have value. You don't know what the value is until you need it,
Right.
and then there it is. You know, what would it look like for people who are cramped up together on a mission to Mars to not have the ability to meditate? What if they have to introduce that into the space program in order for people to not kill each other in some horrible semi, you know, what was the name of that movie? Event Horizon kind of event, right? You know, where you know, they're halfway to Mars and the crew doesn't report back, and why not? Well, maybe they just needed to be a little calmer or a little more focused, and you know, who knows? So this is part of being human, is that exploration of not just creation, but we're also part of that creation. And if we can't explore ourselves, that's sort of a scary idea.
Yeah, it's kind of like a vast circle. As a group of people, we influence other people, and as individuals, we influence the group. And it's kind of understanding, sort of like, how you can move that dynamic in the most positive direction, both for yourself and the group.
I think that's very true. And yet, in some ways, this is new for us. But I suspect that if we were to talk about this with our, 1,000-year-ago ancestors, they would think, they would go, well, duh. What do you guys live in the Dark Ages? Yeah. Maybe they will refer to this as the Dark Ages in the future. Maybe they'll refer to this as the Age of Poison. That's a scary idea too. There are indications that we just like to strip mine everything right down to our spiritual lives from our, everything is about getting as much as you can out of something instead of leaving something for the next guy. I don't know. Maybe we need to learn these things before we are able to go somewhere like, Alpha Centauri. I mean, man, I think that would be great if we could. But if we can't survive the trip because we don't understand our own environment enough to be able to do it, we can't make Biosphere 2 work. Can we build a biosphere that will last 10 years?
Oh, I think we can make Biosphere 2 work.
Really?
Right? Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, why
Have you interviewed David yet?
David.
David Overland?
I don't think so.
Yeah, he'll tell you. He might say some things about that. He was involved in that.
Okay.
Yeah. I think you definitely need to innovate.
And because I read Dreaming the Biosphere and several books in the Biosphere, visited it too.
Oh, really?
So, but still, the thing is,
I would like for us to be able to, but how big does the ship have to be to transport a viable?
The big thing about the Biosphere, they had uncured concrete that took
right.
oxygen out of the air.
Right.
So that's a big problem. But
yeah,
I think that's probably big enough.
I think we need, but how do you put that up there? How do you make it work? How do you cycle it? How do you, what happens if you run out of something you didn't mean to?
And see, all those are questions to be solved. They're
right.
not blockers.
Right.
This is like the research plan.
I know. Right. I'm ready to go. I'm ready. Let's plan it.
Now, I've talked to a lot of people. I'm like, hey, do you think we'll live on multiple planets? And they're like, No, I don't think we're going to be around that long. I think Jesus is going to come back. I think it's going to be the end of the world. And there's a lot of people that really hope the end of the world is soon. Like, we're living in the end times. Like, and I find that to be sort of a way for people to kind of escape responsibility from having to improve the garden and from having to solve the problems. Like, it's almost like problems are good, and the worse we can make it, the quicker the end comes, and then Jesus will be here and things will be over.
So I'm going to offend a bunch of people, right? So that first of all, the fancy word for that in theology is eschatology, right?
The end times.
The end times. It's eschatology. What does it mean to do that? There is a populist idea of what it means portrayed in books like, say, Left Behind series. And then there are people who recognize that is not canon, that it's a theory, and it's one of many, but it's not Christian canon. So that's what's going to upset some people. Second thing that I have to say is we've been talking about the end times for 2,000 years. Some odd years, right? Doesn't mean it's not going to happen. Doesn't mean that it is. It may mean that we don't understand at all what is going to happen. It may mean that we won't understand until after it happens what that stuff meant. And they're building eschatology off of a book that may not have been intended to be eschatological at all. May be a problem. So the definition, God, I hope my New Testament professor isn't watching this, because I'm going to try to remember the words. It's been 10 years. Definition of apocalypse is not what you think. It is a genre of writing in which a spiritual journey is taken that is also interpreted by a spiritual entity. And that is the definition of, it's, you're familiar with, you've read an apocalypse if you did high school, another apocalypse. It's called Christmas Carol. It's a spiritual journey taken by Scrooge, interpreted by a spiritual entity, the ghosts of Christmas, past, present, and future. And that's the same thing for what a lot of people say is a prophetic book, is actually not a prophetic book. It's an apocalypse. And understanding it requires a different lens than trying to look at it through what does it mean that things are coming? It may mean what it says about the past. Again, this thing is not canon, meaning it's not the universal Christian concept. There are some that want you to believe that it is. Now, that all said, doesn't mean that it isn't. I don't know. But here's what I have to say about that. The renewal, screw the planet, rape it. And there are people who say, rape it, it's ours to do with. There are people who literally say that.
Sure. And there's also Christians who say that it's their duty to sin, because if they didn't, they would be saying that they could actually do good works in order to make it to heaven.
Yeah, you are going to get me in so much trouble. Wow.
Gandhi said he loved Christianity. It went for all the Christians.
I like your Christ. I can't stand your Christians.
Yeah.
And that, I think I would relate that back to dogma. So eschatology. There is also something at the end of that eschatology that says that it's the Christians that have to put it back together at the end. And I would challenge that this way. If you say the words, Jesus renewed my heart, you do not actually believe that he went into your chest and replaced all the cells in your body, in your in your actual physical heart and renewed it, why would you say that Jesus is going to renew the world and expect that he's going to replace all the trees? If they do not, you don't get to say that, and then read about pollution in that same potentially eschatological book, and then turn around and not be what I call self-referentially integral. You know, if you reference one thing and say Jesus renewed my heart, he replaced all the cells, and I've got a whole brand new one. We know this not to be true. And Jesus is going to renew the world. He's going to replace all the trees, and all of that pollution is just going to magically disappear. Why would you say that when you know that this other thing didn't happen? What if instead you have to be the guy who cleans up the mess?
Yeah,
And
had to do community service. Like that's the end times. When Jesus comes, all the Christians have to do community service.
Right. So, well, I mean, it might be something along the lines of you don't have to do community service, but it's part of your, becomes part of your faith because you recognize that it's God created the world and said it was good. Why are you not working on this?
Right.
You know, why would you, if he said it's good, why would you turn around and go, screw it, I'm going to rape it?
Right. I mean, it's a gift. I mean,
Right.
you don't,
Right.
Your parents give you a new car, you don't take it down the street and crash it into something.
Right.
And, toss it in.
Exactly. And go, Daddy's just going to buy me a new one. I mean, what a spoiled child that would be.
Right.
So I would challenge it. I would ask people to think deeper, and think deeper and grow more and love. I mean, again, we go back to love God and love your neighbor as yourself. And if that means that you say he built this thing and said it was good, then take care of it. So.
Well, a central point of Christianity, at least institutionalized Christianity, is that the entire universe is created for humans, which
I would challenge that as canon.
But
it doesn't say that it is.
It was a lot easier to defend that point whenever you thought
the
Earth was the center of everything.
A big bowl, which was the original. The original idea of the Earth was that it was a big bowl, and there were ends, and then the stars fit inside of that, faced on inside, and
now that we're just the third planet out from a regular star in the unfashionable end of the spiral galaxy, or however Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy put it.
So, what if? So we live in a world that's sort of Boolean, right? It's true or false. But what if it's both? What if it's both true and not true? What if we are important to to creation, because like this is humans, God made this and it's good, and God made that and it's good, and then God made humans and it's very good. Okay? So let's accept that as a very good thing, right? But it does not have to be an inclusive list, because our culture and their culture don't necessarily make lists the same way, right? The culture at the time might have said, hey, why couldn't there have been somebody else? But this is not an inclusive list. Birds, yeah, but tardigrades were left out, so they must be evil. No, this is not a thing. It's a non-inclusive list. There could be aliens out there. I am sure that there is actually a Catholic treatise on this, that there may be something else out there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's okay to go out and look and say, hey, what if there is, bug-eyed monsters, but they're, they have their own discussions of God, and will God have discussions, with them? We can't know. And maybe we're not supposed to know. We may have more filters to go through before we're even capable of getting it. We have to concentrate on getting some stuff, pulling the beam out of our own eye for a little while, Man, I'm going on the internet for saying all of this stuff.
Oh my goodness.
I'm sure that I'm, send all death threats to the FBI office here in Houston. Yeah, I'm sure that I'm going to offend some people saying that.
But my target audience hasn't even been born yet.
Oh, really?
So my target audience is people living on Mars in 200 years trying to make sense of this
Oh.
pivotal time. So
Yeah, I'm good with this.
so either I mean I posted out there, but almost nobody sees it. So,
Okay, all right.
So-
Just see it if you get death threats.
sure.
Yeah. No, I'm just kidding.
If you could, would you take a trip to space?
Absolutely, if I could. I would have done it right after the first space shuttle exploded. I
Oh,
still
wow.
would have done it. I mean, I remember saying something along the lines of, after they sort of figured out what happened. Well, see, that was 1986. It was, you know, I'm mostly a pacifist, but that one almost got me in a fist fight.
No, really.
Yeah, the story goes like this. I had a girlfriend at the time, and she wanted to be an astronaut, and I was late to German class,
Oh,
and there were these two younger freshman sophomore types who sat in front of me, and I came into class, and I'd missed the announcement because I was in the hall. I couldn't hear it. The hall was loud, and my girlfriend was crying, and these two way too soon freshman sophomore types were sort of tittering, you know, probably nervous tittering, you know, in retrospect. But she's over there crying, and they're talking about how the space shuttle exploded, and I'm thinking they have pranked her, and they got her crying, and I told them if they didn't chill out that I was going to throw a beating. And because, you know, they made my girlfriend cry.
sure.
And she had to stop me and say, no, they announced it over the speaker that the space shuttle had exploded. And I remember thinking, and I don't remember how far down the line this was, but yeah, well, I guess it did. I mean, they're writing an experimental bomb into space. I mean, it's this big, gigantic, filled with fuel. It's a controlled explosion, you know, and I'm not even sure that, I don't even think that Star Trek The Next Generation was out, but I remember thinking later, you know, Captain Kirk makes this look easy.
Yeah.
Because he gets in it and he flies a shuttle around. We get in a shuttle and it's still an experimental ship.
Yeah.
Now, this would have been the 80s, late 80s.
Yeah, I don't think
I don't
Next
think they were-
Generation came back until 1990.
Or, yeah, I think it was 88, 87 is what I want to say.
Oh,
but
you think so? Okay.
I could be wrong.
It could be. It could be.
But I remember, you know, that's part of my logic chain is not necessarily time-based, but, you know, later going, yeah, he makes this look easy, but shuttles explode.
It's
You
true.
know? And in some ways, you know, Star Trek inspires us, but in some ways it also makes it look so easy that we have no appreciation for how difficult this thing is, you know.
It's true. But, you know, driving is an amazing feat, too.
Yes.
And we've gotten that down to something that we could do. It's
That
all
would be
about
great.
how you package it, right?
That's true.
The maturity. And even like computers, you know, now you press the power button. I'm 99.99% sure my computer is actually going to boot up this time.
Right, exactly, and that's true. And they're deeply complex pieces of equipment, it's when you try. If you were to try to sit down and teach somebody who's new, and I've had to do this. I used to teach A+ certification, which, for those of you who don't know, is the entry level for how to repair, for computer repair and maintenance. Right, it's the entry level certification for computer repair and maintenance is what I would say, and I remember thinking as I'm teaching this stuff, maybe I don't know as much about computer science as I think I do. Maybe if I were transported back in time to, you know, Connecticut Yankee and King Arthur's court days, you know, that I could, and they asked me to build one of these things. Oh yeah, prove it. You know, and all I could do is a retarded look. Just trust me, it works. You know, and I think there is this book, a science fiction book, written by Harry Turtledove, where aliens invade World War II Earth, right? And they're bringing along modern, what we would consider modern technology, and they capture an alien lizard guy, and they say, "How does this work?" And the alien lizard computer technician goes, I don't know. I just know the board doesn't work, and so I replace the board in the computer, and it works again. And it's what IT guys do,
Exactly.
right? They don't have. They may know that DDR6 or DDR5 works great, but they may not have any idea just how to build a chip or
Right.
or the basis under. You know, no, that's some other dude's job. You know, yeah, so that's What was the question again? Because I think I've gone on a tangent.
Would you take a trip to space?
Yes, I would.
And
Yes, I would.
You think you'll get a chance in your lifetime?
No, I do not. I do not. I think it's going to be reserved for a long time for people with money, and or people with training like NASA astronauts.
Well, thank you so much, Hal. It's a pleasure to get to talk to you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. God bless, and